Put a marginalized youth in a traditional interview room, and their nervous system instantly triggers a fight or flight response. These are transitional age youth, young adults between 16 and 29. They face a dangerous developmental cliff. Overnight, they abruptly age out of pediatric health systems and child welfare, losing their primary support network. This textbook excerpt outlines the reality they face next. Contemporary labor markets are characterized by discontinuities in work and high expectations for entry, putting intense pressure on young adults trying to find their footing. This dynamic creates the Matthew effect. Resource-rich youth enter the workforce on an upward trajectory of exploration. Marginalized youth face compounding barriers, falling further and further behind on a path of systemic abandonment. When traditional programs drop standard readiness assessments into this bottom pathway, they demand high-level executive skills like resume writing before the youth has any emotional stability. The result is a sharp plummet directly into dropout. We cannot blame a young person for exhibiting survival behaviors during a job search. To prevent failure, the system itself has to adapt to their neurological reality. If you run a community drop-in hub, you know the logistical trap. Funders often expect you to transition 70 youth into the workforce annually, using only part-time staff working 21 hours a week. You are caught in a bind. Enforcing strict readiness standards forces your most vulnerable participants out of the program, while dropping all standards means you risk losing your essential funding entirely. The practical solution is a trauma-informed 7-week curriculum built directly on the Individual Placement and Support, or IPS, framework. The non-negotiable rule about a PS is zero exclusion. If a young person tells you they want to work, they are in. You bypass arbitrary clinical readiness tests completely. This model prioritizes the peer-led relationships required to help a young person stay employed long-term. To hit the 70 youth quota, divide the year into 4 7-week cohorts. In weeks 1 and 2, explicitly delay resumes. Focus on nonlinear mapping to reframe chaotic histories as survival strengths. This establishes the window of tolerance, building psychological safety before the cognitive demands of a job search. The trade-off falls on the program directors. You must educate stakeholders and funders to accept a delay in tangible metrics, like submitted job applications, during the first quarter. Holding off on resumes in week 1 is a strict clinical prerequisite to guarantee the youth shows up for week 2. The Vocational Sandbox is a low-stakes, highly repetitive physical environment designed to safely anchor a youth's nervous system. In weeks 3 and 4, place participants in inclusive, hyper-local volunteer shifts, like food banks or animal shelters, rather than pushing them immediately into high-pressure corporate roles. This lets them practice time management, build real-world stamina, and generate authentic references without the terrifying threat of being fired if they experience a trauma response on shift. Executing this requires a heavy upfront investment from your staff. They must actively source, vet, and maintain relationships with safe community partners who understand the demographic. These volunteer hours act as active wellness rituals, slowly titrating the nervous system's exposure to responsibility. By weeks 5 and 6, the curriculum shifts to bureaucratic co-navigation. For many, the biggest barrier to employment is the acute terror of losing social assistance and medication coverage the moment they earn a paycheck. Peer workers address this using concrete math. They map out exact provincial earnings exemptions, down to the dollar, to completely eliminate that paralyzing fear. The trade-off is that your staff must maintain a high, constantly updated literacy on complex provincial tax and disability legislation to properly protect the participants. Week 7 launches them into the workforce. Instead of high-stakes corporate interviews, you facilitate low-pressure informational networking. You frame code switching as a protective, professional bilingualism, preserving their personal identity while navigating new environments. By the end of the program, these young adults possess the systemic literacy and emotional boundaries necessary to sustain a career long-term, far beyond simply landing an initial placement. Over 12 months, this blueprint is projected to yield an 80% cohort completion rate, with over half successfully transitioning into work, internships, or education. This model works if your organization is willing to position lived experience peer workers as equal, non-hierarchical partners to your clinical staff. Avoid this approach entirely if your agency relies on transactional funding models that mandate rapid 14-day corporate placements. For multi-barriered youth, the vocational journey provides the momentum and stability needed to fuel every other stage of recovery.